Okay, great. So as you can see, I am inside my Moodle course. I have actually gone ahead and created some other activities here. But all you need to do to get started, obviously, is to first turn on your editing. But then once you do that, is just to go ahead and click on Add an Activity or Resource. When you do that, you'll want to scroll down and find Turnitin Assignment 2. Choose that and create your activity. The first thing it's going to ask us to do is give it this an assignment name. You can add a summary or description or instructions if you'd like. You can choose your submission type, file upload or text submission or any. You can actually choose multiple parts. Now, this is really nice. So down here I have part number 1. If I choose to create 2 parts, you can see now when I scroll down, I actually have 2 parts. So if you're creating an assignment that maybe has multiple drafts, you could create a multi-part assignment that allows students to submit to draft 1, draft 2, and then possibly a final draft as well. You don't have to obviously choose multiple parts, but you do have that ability, and that's really nice inside of Moodle. You can actually give each part its own grade, and it will keep each of your student submissions in each part separate so that you can see how they've progressed from one submission to the next. You do have the ability, if you'd rather, is to just create multiple activities, multiple assignments, and call those draft 1 or draft 2 or final draft if you'd like, but you do have the ability to create a multi-part assignment if you'd rather. I'm going to go ahead and move that back to part 1. Our maximum file size here, you actually can choose this. By default, it's going to let your students load up to 100 megabytes, but if you'd rather, you can choose their max if you want to. Allow submission of any file type, yes or no. This is important. For Turnitin to be able to create a similarity report, there has to be text inside the file your students submit. If you allow for any submission type, they could possibly submit an image file, and they could submit an image of text, and it would appear as text to you. But your word count would come out as 0, and your similarity score would also come out as 0 because technically there's no text inside that file. So I usually suggest leaving it to no, so that it only accepts those file types that Turnitin can check for similarity. And those file types are, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, basically any file type that has text inside of it. Display Originality Reports to students. This is just a simple yes or no. If you choose yes, your students will be able to open up their Similarity Report and see their matching as well. You also have grade display, percentage or fraction, auto refresh grades or scores. Yes, automatically, or no, you will refresh scores and grades manually. I usually suggest choosing the automatic option. If you have a very large class, it may take a little while for it to go in and refresh each individual paper. So depending on the size of your class, you might want to choose otherwise, but typically auto refresh is the easiest. And then you can set these values as your default, so the next time you create your assignment, it will do those for you. Our next option here is grade. You can choose your type and your maximum grade, your grade category, and your grade to pass. When you create an assignment inside Turnitin, it will create a column inside your Moodle gradebook as well. So I created a 1-part assignment here. I can give this a name. You can choose your start date, your due date, and your post date. Start date and due date are pretty obvious. Your post date, this is the date that your students will be able to see any comments that you've added to their paper inside Feedback Studio. So if you have a student who comes to you and says, yes, I can see my similarity, I can see my ETS Eraider purple comments, but I don't see any of your comments, you're going to want to check to make sure that your post date has passed. This can be any date or time as long as it's after the start date. Next are our Originality Report options. Allow submissions after the due date. You want to allow for late submissions, yes or no. If you allow for late submissions, keep in mind it will not let your students submit or resubmit late. It's only going to allow students to submit late if they haven't submitted at all. So just something to keep in mind. Report generation speed. You have three options here. Generate reports immediately. Students cannot submit. So kind of a one and done. They would submit their paper. They would immediately receive back their score. They can open up their similarity report and see where they've matched. Your second option is generate reports immediately. Students can resubmit until the due date. After 3 resubmissions, reports generated after 24 hours. Oops, 1 second here. If anybody, if you could maybe mute your microphones, we're getting a little feedback training here. So this second option, generate reports immediately, students would submit, they would immediately receive that score. They can resubmit until the due date as many times as they want. Now keep in mind when they resubmit, it is going to overwrite their previous submission. So you will only be able to see the similarity report for their latest submission. If you want to be able to see each submission separately, I suggest you might create a multi-part assignment, or you create multiple Moodle assignments so that you can see each submission individually. The other thing I'll mention here, like it mentions here, is after 3 resubmissions, reports generate after 24 hours. The reason why we've done this is trying to stop students from gaming the system. And what I mean by that is occasionally there'll be a student who maybe the paper or the assignment is due the next day. They will go and find material on the internet or other various places as well, copy and paste, submit their paper, receive back their similarity score. Maybe their score is at 80%. They then take out the thesaurus, move some things around, submit again. Now that score has gone down to 70. They'll take that back and they'll just keep hacking away at it and submitting over and over again until they get that score down to an acceptable range. To combat that type of behavior, we've allowed students to submit once. They'll get back their report immediately. They can resubmit 3 times and get that report immediately. Upon their 4th resubmission, that similarity score will not generate for 24 hours. So just something to keep in mind there. Your third option, generate reports on the due date. Students can resubmit until the due date. So they can submit, but they will not receive a similarity score or have the ability to open up their similarity report until the due date has passed. They can, however, continue to resubmit until the due date. Any questions about any of these options? Okay. At any time, if you're confused about some of the options, you can hover over this little question mark and it'll give you a little more information. Here you have check against stored student papers, check against the internet, and check against journals, periodicals, and publications. We currently have over 1 billion student papers in our repository. And if you choose yes, your students' papers will be checked against that repository. Check against internet, we currently have over 70 billion websites archived going back 8 years. And we also partner with major journals, periodicals, and publications and have back-end access to their content as well. You can choose not to check against any of these options if you'd like. Just keep in mind you need to choose at least one for us to generate a similarity report. And you also have the option to check against your institutional repository as well. These next options here are exclusions. Exclude bibliography, exclude quoted materials, and exclude small matches. So if you choose to exclude bibliography, it will not check any content that follows the words references, works cited, or bibliography. If you exclude quoted material, it will not check any content that falls within quotation marks. And then lastly, when you open up your similarity reports, you'll see that Turnitin gets very specific, down to very small matches, even down to a 1% match. Now you may find that these similarity matches become, or lists become very lengthy and you don't need to see the smallest matches. You can choose to exclude those. So you could choose to come in and exclude 8 word matches or less. Or you could choose to exclude by percentage. Now keep in mind percentage is based on word count. So if it's a 1,000-word paper and you choose 1%, that's a 10-word match. So I usually say stick with words unless you know for sure that you would like to exclude by percentage. These exclusions are at the assignment level, so it will affect every student's submission. You do have the ability inside Feedback Studio, and we'll see that in a little bit, to choose these exclusions on a paper-by-paper basis. So if you don't want to choose an assignment level option for an exclusion, you do still have the ability, if you open up a student's paper, and you're just curious what their score might be, if you excluded bibliography and excluded quota materials, you can still do that for one single paper at a time if you'd like. Our next options here are grade mark options. You have the ability to add a rubric to your student's assignment. If you add a rubric here, it will appear inside Feedback Studio, your Similarity Report, and you'll have the ability to grade from that rubric inside Feedback Studio. If you were to add a rubric to an assignment through possible Moodle options, that rubric would be assigned to your assignment, but it would not appear inside Feedback Studio. So if you would like rubrics to grade from inside Feedback Studio, you're going to want to choose and add your rubrics here. I've added a rubric already, so that appears in my dropdown. And if you add any rubrics, they'll follow you from semester to semester and from course to course. So I can choose to add my rubric here. You do have a Rubric Manager that you can access. If you click on the Rubric Manager, it will open up the Rubric Manager for you, and it will show you here, for instance, is one of the default rubrics available. Up here is our menu button, and if I click on that, I have the ability at any time to create a brand new rubric. If I choose to create a new rubric, you can see it gives me a blank rubric here. I can simply create my rubric from scratch, or I could copy and paste if I want to. I can change the scales, the scores, and the criterion and percentages if I want. You have a few options of types of rubrics. This type here is your standard rubrics. So you enter scale values for each column and weight your criteria rows using percentages. You can create a custom rubric where you can enter any value directly into each rubric cell. And then you also have the ability to create a qualitative rubric that provides standard feedback but has no numeric scoring. So if you'd like to create rubrics, you can create them here. And again, as you create rubrics, they will follow you to your next course as well. If I click on that menu button again, I also have the ability to create grading forms. Grading forms are kind of a toned down version of a rubric. I can add my criterion, I can add my description, and when we open up the Similarity Report with Feedback Studio, we can actually grade for each of these areas that we've created. As you start to add rubrics and grading forms, those will appear down here for you so that you can come back and edit those anytime you want. So over here on the right is your View, Import, Export button. You can export rubrics like I mentioned at any time, and you can send those and share those with colleagues. If you click the Import button, you can actually go in and select rubrics that you may have on your own hard drive. Now, here's the only thing about that. You can't just simply upload a Word document or an Excel sheet because it won't be formatted correctly and it won't come out looking correct. So what we have for you is a rubric library at Turnitin.com under our faculty resources, where you can go into our rubric library and you can take a look at different rubrics, and you can choose to download rubrics, and you can upload them here by selecting those files and uploading our sample rubrics. You do have the ability to upload an Excel sheet, but if you're going to use an Excel sheet, you need to download our example template here. It's a basic Excel sheet, but inside it's templated correctly so that the system can read it. So if you want to do that, you can open up this sample template and you can copy and paste and create your rubrics that way if you don't want to create a brand new rubric the way we were before. Just keep in mind, down here you can see Turnitin rubric files must be in a .rbc file format, or they must be in an Excel format. The .rbc file format is the format from our rubric library. If you were to download your own rubric and send it to a colleague to upload, it would download in this .rbc file format. So you'd be okay there. But just keep in mind, if you want to use rubrics, you'll either need to create them brand new, like I showed you before, or you can open up this example template here in an Excel sheet and copy and paste and create your rubrics that way. And if you do that, you just need to then import them in by selecting those files. Any questions about importing or exporting rubrics? Okay, so I'm going to jump back here really quick. You have the ability to duplicate rubrics. If you download a rubric from our rubric library, it's not going to let you simply edit those. if you want to use our rubrics kind of as a jumping off point, you'll want to duplicate that rubric and then make changes to that copy. You do have the ability to rename rubrics if you need to, and you can delete any rubrics that you've created. Okay. Any questions about the Rubric Manager or using rubrics before I close out this window? All right. I'm going to go ahead and click close. I've attached a rubric from my list of rubrics here. And that brings us to our next option, which is to enable the Eraider grammar check. It's either yes or no. If I choose yes, it will make these options available to me here. And basically what this is artificial intelligence that will automatically check your student's paper for spelling, grammar, usage, mechanics, and style. In addition to automatically checking your students' papers, it will also give your students access to an online handbook. And you can choose what level handbook you want it to open up by default. When they open up the handbook, they can still toggle between these different versions. You're just choosing the default that opens up. And you can also use or choose your dictionary as well. I'm going to go ahead and choose to have it check for all of these, but you don't have to have it check for all of these. And even when you do choose what you'd like, when you open up Feedback Studio or the Similarity Report, you have the option to turn these off if you want to. These appear as purple comments inside the student's paper. They are automatic, and when a student clicks on them, it will give them a description of the issue they might be having, as well as that link to the handbook. And I'll show you that here in a little bit as well. After those options, the rest of these here are all Moodle options that you can choose if you'd like. At this point, I can click Save and Display. And now my students have the ability to submit to this assignment that I created. This is my assignment inbox. I have a few tabs up top here. I have Turnitin Tutors, which allows the ability to add a co-instructor or a TA if you want to. We also have a list of our Turnitin students. Now, when you use this for the first time and you click on this tab, most likely it will appear empty. The reason for that is students are not added to this list until they've submitted to at least one Turnitin assignment. The reason for this is until they've submitted to at least one assignment in your class or any other class, we don't have a Turnitin account built for them. When they submit for the first time, we create a Turnitin account for them on our end based on the email address that's used. So as Turnitin is increasingly used throughout the school, more and more students will start to pop up on these lists because they will have already submitted and they have an account for them. If you don't like that this is empty the first time you use it, you can click on Enroll All Students, and it will simply push all of those student emails to Turnitin.com, and we will create accounts for them automatically. So it's up to you. If you want to just leave it, it will slowly populate as students submit to their first assignment, or you can push all of those accounts through, and we will auto-populate that for you. I'm going to jump back to my Submission Inbox tab here. You can see it has our start date, due date, and post dates, also our grade available. Here is a link to our rubric and our Rubric Manager if we want to open that up. We don't have to, we can access the Rubric Manager outside of the assignment creation by clicking on this button. And we also have here our Quickmark Manager. I'm going to show you this in more detail when we open up Feedback Studio, the Similarity Report, and I'll show you how that works. But you can access your Quickmark Manager here as well. There's also a Turnitin message inbox here if you receive any messages from the Turnitin team, possibly allowing or letting you know of any downtime coming up or any updates that you can look forward to. You can find those here. You also have the ability to notify any non-submitters. So if maybe the day before you'd like to notify those folks that have not turned in a paper yet, you can notify them that way as well. The other thing I'd like to show you here is you have the ability to create Peermark assignments. Peermark assignments are peer review assignments. So if you'd like students to review other students or possibly even review themselves, you can create a Peermark assignment by clicking on this little gear button here. And this launches the Peermark Manager. So if I click on this gear, it's going to let me know I don't have any Peermark assignments associated with this base assignment yet, but all I need to do is click on this little plus button. And when I do that, it opens up this screen for us. So it's created a title for me based on the assignment that I've already created. And you can't have any Peermark assignments outside of an existing Turnitin paper assignment. The reason for this, obviously, is that students need to be able to review a paper. So it's basically piggybacking on this existing assignment. You do have the ability to add points to say how much you want this assignment to be worth, but keep in mind, because it's piggybacking on another assignment, it is not going to automatically create a column in your gradebook because a column already exists for this assignment we just created. So if you would like to use Peermark and have it graded and added to your gradebook, you will have to manually create a column in your gradebook and populate those grades. You can still use Peermark and peer review. If you don't want to create a column in your gradebook and do that, you can, by all means. Just keep that in mind because that can cause confusion down the road. You can add your own instructions for this peer review assignment. And by default, it's going to pull over your due date from the assignment we just created because students won't be able to start the reviews until the due date has passed. You can tell the system how long can students review and when is it turned off. And then when would you like that peer feedback available? Once you've chosen those options, you want to click on this additional settings button. And here's where you can choose some more options for this peer review assignment. Do you want to award maximum points on review? So if students just attempt to complete their peer review assignment, it will award maximum points, yes or no. Students can view the names of their peers during the review, yes or no. Students without a submission can review, yes or no. So if you choose no, students will only be able to complete the peer review assignment if they've submitted a paper themselves. You have a couple of options here. Automatically distribute papers for review. The system will automatically pair up each student with one other student's paper. You can choose to pair it up with more papers if you want to. That's up to you. And you also have the option for students can self-select papers for review. So if you would like to make this 0, you could then have students go in and pair themselves up and choose their own peer to review. And then lastly, students must review their own paper. So would you like students reviewing their own paper as well for a self-review? You can choose yes or no for that as well. Once you've chosen your options, you need to make sure and click Save and Continue. If you were to chosen all your options and just jump to this next tab or this tab, it will not save those options. So make sure for this first tab that you click the Save and Continue button. Once you've chosen those options, you can now choose your Peermark questions. So how the peer review assignment works is that you will actually choose or create questions that your students will answer during the review process. It will give them access to another student's paper or possibly their own paper, and they'll be asked to answer those questions. We give you here a sample library, and you also have the ability to create your own questions here as well. If you've created your own questions, you can then create your own library from your own questions, and you also have the ability to delete libraries as well. But if I click on this sample library, it's going to give me a list of sample questions that we've chosen. Most popular questions for a peer review. Rate this paper's overall readability. At which point did you feel most interested by this piece? When least, explain. And you also see here that it asks them to write at least 5 words to be able to get credit for completing that question. And then there are also another list of others that you can choose as well. Once you've chosen all the questions that you'd like them to answer, you can click Add Selected Questions. And these are the questions that they'll have to answer as part of their peer review process. You can delete them out at any time. You can add additional questions if you want. And if you'd like to reorder these questions, you can. The last option you have here is distribution. So if you remember, the first 2 options were let the system match up and pair your students itself, let students choose their own peer to review, or you as this instructor can come in here and match students up and pair them up yourself if you'd like to. Those are your 3 options. Once you've finished with this 3rd tab and you have all the options chosen you'd like and all the questions you'd like, you can simply close this out. And now you can see it's created our peer review assignment with our start date, due date, post date, and the grade for it as well, and the number of reviews required per student. Students will now see this as well when they open up this assignment. They will see both of these listed for them so that they can complete this assignment in its entirety. Once students have started to submit to peer review and have started reviewing their peers, you can click this little button here, which is to launch Peermark reviews. And it will show you a list of all your students, let you know how many papers they reviewed or submitted, how many papers have been received by that student from other peer reviews, and then you have the ability to review their peer reviews as well. I'll show you an example of that here in a little bit. Any questions about the Peermark peer review assignments?
Hey Ryan, this is Jill Bond. I have some questions for you about this one part.
Okay.
First of all, can students use a rubric, the rubric for the assignment, to evaluate another student's paper in peer review? And my second question is, can you do peer review in like assignment part 1, but not do it in assignment part 2? Thanks.
Sure, and those are great questions. Unfortunately, you cannot attach a rubric to a peer review assignment. They simply have to create or answer those questions. If that was something you wanted to utilize, you might want to create your own questions and maybe copy and paste parts of that rubric as questions and have them evaluated that way.
Okay.
Yeah, as for your second question here, let me go back. Let's take a quick sec, because to be honest with you, I have not been asked that question in a long time, and I want to make sure that it actually still works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm editing this assignment, and I'm adding a second part. I'll just call this final draft, and then I'm going to come down and click Save and Display. So now what it's done is it's created me a second part. So I have my paper assignment, then I have my final draft. And yes, you do still have the ability to create a Peermark review for each of those separate parts.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions before we jump into an example of a student submission and taking a look at their Similarity Report in Feedback Studio? Okay, so I'm going to jump back over. I'm going to go into that first paper that I created, and I'm going to open up that inbox. And here you can see some example submissions from my students. So you will see your student name, their submission title, their Turnitin paper ID. This is very important if you or your students have to create a tech support case for maybe there was an issue with a submission. You need to include this paper ID. Like I mentioned, we currently have over 1 billion student papers in our repository, and they're very difficult to find without this paper ID. It lets us know when that student submitted. It lets us know their similarity score, and it's color-coded depending on the severity of that score. We also have the pencil icon here to go in and grade. You have the ability to submit on behalf of a student if you'd like to. You can download their original submission if you want to see that Word doc that they submitted. And then you also have the refresh submissions and the ability to delete. So for example here, all you need to do to open up a student similarity report is click on their score or that pencil icon, and either one of those will open up Feedback Studio, their similarity report. So here you can see we're inside Feedback Studio. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here a little bit so you can see a little bit more of this paper. You have the ability to scroll through the student's paper. You also have the ability to use this little thumbnail over here and move from page to page if you'd like. Lets us know the name of our student as well as the title of their paper. And at any time, I can come in here and give them a grade if I want to. Now, one thing I'm going to mention about this little box here is on occasion we have instructors letting us know that they're changing grades, but it's not refreshing in the grade book, and those grades aren't passing. What we found is that a lot of the times an instructor will open up the student's paper, quickly jump in, change their score, and then just close out the tab. But you'll notice what you have to do once you've changed a score is click anywhere else in the paper and lock that score in. So just something to keep in mind if you're just updating grades is go ahead and make those changes. Make sure you click elsewhere and lock it in, and now that grade will transfer to your gradebook. One of the other nice things about Feedback Studio is that you don't have to close it out and open it up for each student. You can move to your next student submission by clicking this little arrow here. You could move back a previous submission by clicking this arrow, or you can click this drop down and you can jump from student to student if you want to and continue grading. Up here in the right, we have a helpful little help button here. It will take you to our guides and our instructions for interpreting the Similarity Report, viewing the Similarity Report, rubrics and grading forms, commenting tools, and layers. You can also view our full help guide if you'd like. And if you click on the Join Our Community, it will take you to our Turnitin community website where you can take a look at best practices, ask questions, join discussions, take a look at our full guides, join our blog, all those type of great things. So I encourage you to please click on that community button as well. Over here on the right, we have our layers. If I click this top button here, it lets me know my different layers. I have a grading layer, which is this blue layer here, and I'm going to want to turn that on. I have a similarity layer, and I have my ETS Eraider layer. You'll notice when I click this grading layer, if I don't click it, I don't see any of my comments. This is another part that you'll want to take into consideration. If your students have told you they can't see any of your comments, you want to make sure that post date has passed and also that your grading layer has been turned on. You'll also notice when I click the Eraider layer and turn that on, these purple comments pop up for us and for our students. Okay. Our first button here is our Quickmarks tab. And you'll notice I already have a bunch of comments added to my student's paper here. Now you have a list of sets available to you for your Quickmarks that you can choose from. For instance, here's commonly used. And all I have to do to add a Quickmark to my student's paper is just grab it, drag it, and drop it to anywhere I want on my student's paper. When my student sees a Quickmark or a comment, all they have to do is click on it. It will give them a description. And you have the ability as an instructor to add your own comment. You can format that comment. You can add links. And it also gives you the ability to assign rubric criterion. So the rubric I created had these areas, and I can assign criterion to each of these areas depending on the Quickmark that I added. And what it's going to do is it's going to tally up all of these rubrics that I add all of these Quickmarks that I add criterion to, so that when it comes time for me to grade from my rubric, it will give me a tally of all the different comments and Quickmarks that I've added for that area. And I'll show you that here in a little bit. But again, it's just as simple as dragging and dropping anywhere you want. You can always move them around if you want to. If you have added a Quickmark and you don't want to use it any longer, you can click the little trash button here, and it will delete for both you and your student. You also have the ability to click right into the paper and add a Quickmark right where you click. So if I want a Quickmark right here, but I don't want to drag and drop, I can click into the paper, and I can choose Quickmark, and I can add the Quickmark I want to that area. Again, my students will get that description. I can add my own comment if I want, and I can assign that rubric criterion like before. My second option here is if I click right into the paper, is I can add my own comment. So if I choose to add a comment, I can type in my comment for my student. Again, I can assign that criterion if I want to. And now my student will be able to see my comment. I also have the ability to convert this comment to a Quickmark. So if you find that you're adding the same comments over and over again to students' papers, I can simply click Convert to Quickmark, give this Quickmark a name, decide what set I want that Quickmark to be added to, and when I click on Convert to Quickmark, you'll notice over here, oh, where'd that go? Oops, sorry. Let me do that again. Convert to Quickmark. I clicked the wrong button. I clicked Convert to Quickmark instead of Save. Now when I click the Save button, it adds and creates that Quickmark over here, and now I can drag and drop this for my next student if I want to. As you add Quickmarks, they will follow you from course to course and from semester to semester, so you won't have to recreate them, but you can delete them anytime if you want to. Our other option is to click into the paper, and our third option here is the inline text. And I can just simply type right into my student's paper, and when they open it up, they'll see my note here for them. If I don't want that, I can just click the little trash button and it will disappear. You'll also notice these little Quickmarks and comments have these little initials. That is my initials as an instructor. So if you had co-instructors and they were each accessing students' papers and adding marks, it will add that instructor's initials to each of those marks so students know where it's coming from. I also have the option of highlighting students' papers as well. So if I was to come down here and highlight this little portion, I could add a quick mark for this highlight here. And I could choose my quick mark. I can choose what color highlight I want that quick mark to be. I can still, you can see my student's description. I can add my comment. I can add that criterion if I want to. And the nice part about it is now if I drag this anywhere on the paper, it will create a direct line to that highlight for the student. I can also highlight and choose to add a comment. I can again choose that color. I can convert it to a quick mark if I want to, but just like the quick mark, if I drag my comment, it will create that direct line for me as well. My last option here is to highlight and just choose this third option, which is just a strike through. And if I click strike through, you can see it strikes through that portion for my student. And then maybe I could choose to add a inline text. And now I can add a note right next to that strike through for them. So that's how easy it is to add quick marks, add comments, add highlights, and strike through. Any questions about anything we've just walked through? Okay. The other thing I'm going to show you here, this little gear, this is our Quickmark Manager. So if I click on this gear, it's going to open up my Quickmark Manager for me. You can see I'm inside my commonly used set. And here are my, for this here, I have this Quickmark associated with other sets as well. Up here is my menu button. If I click on that, I can create a brand new set. So I could create my own, oops, sorry there. Create my own set and click save. But now you'll notice that this is blank. I'm starting from scratch. I can create a brand new quick mark right here if I want to. Instead of converting a comment into a quick mark, I can just create my own quick mark. I can click this little plus button here and create a quick mark as well. But the other thing I could do is I could click on my menu button and I could go through my various sets here. And I can find quick marks that I like, that I'd like to add to my UCSF that I just created. And I can create or add this quick mark here to my set. So I could choose my UCSF set. I could move on to another quick mark set. It will load up for me. You can see here's an add to set button. I can say I want this quick mark added to my UCSF. And I can just go through and choose all the quick marks that I'd like to add to the set I just created. Now if I go back to my UCSF set, you can see here are those that I just added. So you can build out your own set so you don't have to use any of our default sets. And if you do build out your own sets, again, it's going to follow you from course to course and semester to semester, but you also have the ability, just like the Rubric Manager, to download your Quickmark set and to send it to a colleague who can then upload your Quickmark set so everybody's using the same marks. So that's how easy it is to create your own set, how easy it is to share your sets if you'd like to. You can delete sets if you want to, and you can rename them if you need to as well. Over here, this little help button, if you click on that, will take you to our guide for how to use the Quickmark Manager, just like what we've walked through just now. And you also have the ability to search for quick marks here if you want to. Any questions about the Quickmark Manager? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that out. If you think of anything, let me know. We can always jump back here and take another look. Our next layer is our feedback summary. You have the ability to leave a voice comment up to 3 minutes for that student if you want to. And you can also add a summative text comment if you want to, up to 5,000 characters, and you can format that and add links if you want. These feedback summary options here will be available to your student when they open up Feedback Studio on their end. They'll be able to listen to your voice comment and see your text. Our third button here is our rubric. You can see this is that macroeconomics rubric that I added to this paper. At any time, I can use these sliders to grade for these different areas of my rubric. I can scroll through and you can see it's tallying up my points for me here. And as I go through and grade them, I can then click apply to grade and you'll see my 89 change to a 20. And that's because I didn't actually go through and give these guys points here. So I'll give them a little bit more. You'll also notice these little bubbles here. And if I click on those, these are those quick marks or comments that I added rubric criterion to. So when it comes times to grade your student by your rubric, you can click this little button and it'll give you a nice list of all the different comments that you've added to help you with your grading. If you don't like the sliders, you can click this little button here, which is the full-size rubric. It will open up for you, and then you can simply choose the boxes for their scores, and you can click Apply to Grade, and it will apply those changes to your student's grade for you. And you can see over here on the left, it too contains that tally of quick marks and comments as well. Once I've graded, I can click the Close button, and you can see now my grades moved to a 48. You also have a gear here, and this will take you to the Rubric Manager, which we already walked through when we created the assignment, but you can access the Rubric Manager here as well. So you can access the Rubric Manager when creating your assignment, you can access it in your assignment inbox, and you can access it here inside Feedback Studio. You can also access the Grademark or the Quickmark Manager from within your assignment inbox and from within Feedback Studio as well. Any questions about the blue grading layer? Okay, our next layer here is our Similarity Tools, our Similarity layer. If I click on that, you'll see I have 4 options. And the first, this 50, this is my student score that we clicked on in the inbox. And if I click on that, it's going to show me my students' largest matches and where they match to. So for instance, if I click on this match here, you can see it lets me know that my student, their first paragraph here, this number 3, purple 3 matches with this purple 3 here. My student's score or paragraph here matched to a student at Tennessee State University. We obviously can't show you that student's paper in its entirety for obvious reasons, but you do have the ability actually to reach out to that instructor and ask for the ability to take a look at that student's paper. You can do that by clicking on this little button here, and it will actually send out a note to that instructor asking for permission to see the student's paper. Now, a couple of things here. We cannot guarantee that that instructor is going to give you permission. We also can't guarantee that that email or that note is actually going to get to that instructor. We are sending out that email based on the email address they used when using Turnitin. If they don't teach anymore, if the school has updated their email addresses, or maybe they teach at a different school, there's a good chance that request may go nowhere. So just something to keep in mind, but you do have the ability to reach out. This, for instance here, this 15%, you can see it matches to this internet source here at doing.gd. And here's our match. This is actually the match within the context of the article itself. This is kind of a small view. So if you'd like to see the entire article, you can click on the full source view here. And over here on the right, it loads up the entire article and where your students matched within that article. You can also visit the actual source itself and jump out to that website. Just keep in mind, you're leaving Turnitin when you jump to these websites, so we can't guarantee you what you're going to see on the other end. And obviously, if you jump to the website, it's not going to highlight your students' matches for you. But you do have the ability to visit these sources if you want to. Like I mentioned, these are our largest matches. One thing I want to mention as an aside here is that Turnitin is never going to tell you that something is plagiarized. We're simply showing you matches from our various repository. It's up to each instructor to decide if plagiarism has taken place. So for instance, even though this shows a match here, if my student had cited this correctly, then maybe it's not plagiarized. We're just simply showing you matches and similarity that we found in our various repositories. So please just keep that in mind. This can be a tough thing for students to see for the first time, and it can kind of freak them out a little bit. So it's important to let them know that, obviously this can be used as a punitive tool, but we also hope that it's being used as a learning tool, helping students understand what plagiarism is, the different version or types of plagiarism and how to cite correctly and when to, and just bringing things to students' attention. So hopefully they can fix those items before they actually submit their papers. Like I mentioned before, these are our largest matches, but within these larger matches actually reside smaller sub-matches. So this little arrow here, we can actually view the match breakdown. And if we click on that, it will show me a giant list of every single match to my students paragraph, all the way down to the 2%, 1%. So you can see this student here, and if I click on that, the University of Ulster. This student at the University of Ulster used just this highlighted portion of my student's larger match inside their paper. This publication here used just this highlighted portion of my larger match inside their publication. And this internet source here used this highlighted portion inside their internet website. So you can see we get very specific down to the smallest matches for you. And this is why you might find that choosing those exclusions might come in handy, because these lists can be quite long when it comes to these different matches here. And this was just one of our matches. So if I click on the 15%, it too is going to give me a giant list. Now, if you don't want to have to drill into each of the larger matches to see those smaller sub-matches, you can choose this button here, which is the All Sources view, and it's simply going to show you one giant list of every single match, from student papers to internet sources to publications, journals, and articles. Now, if it's getting too long, or possibly you find some matches that you just don't want your students to see for whatever reason, you can exclude sources if you want to. I can click this Exclude Sources button. I can choose these matches, and I can click the Exclude button, and those matches will drop off our list and our students' list as well. Our third button here is our filters and settings, and this is where you can choose those exclusions on a paper-by-paper basis. So maybe the student score is quite high, but it's a pretty lengthy research paper. It includes a long bibliography, a lot of quotations. Maybe I'm just curious what their score would be if I chose those exclusions. I can choose those exclusions. I can choose to exclude small sources if I want to. All I have to do is click Apply Changes, and you'll most likely see your student score drop from a 50 down to maybe a 20, depending on how many quotes and how long their bibliography is. You can apply those changes. It will run a new report. Unfortunately for this paper here, I don't have quotations or bibliography, so it really hasn't changed my score, but most likely you'll see it drop. And then if you want, you can go back to the filters and settings. You can uncheck those items, choose to apply those changes, and your score will go back to what it was before. So you do have that option if you, when creating the assignment, to choose these exclusions on an assignment level, or you can choose to choose those exclusions on a paper-by-paper basis inside Feedback Studio. Our last button here are our excluded sources. So these are those 4 sources that I excluded. I can click the Restore All button, and these will go back to our giant list, or I can choose to come in and just restore certain items if I want to at a time. Now, your students' side of Feedback Studio pretty much works exactly the same way as your side. They don't have the ability to add Quickmarks. They don't have the ability to leave voice comments. Basically, they would have one button here where they can access all of your voice comments or your text comments. They would see all of your quotes, but they don't have the ability to change anything or add anything. Likewise, for this layer here, they don't have the ability to exclude sources, but they do have the ability to filter out just like we did. So if a student wanted to, they could go in here and choose these filters for themselves just to see what their paper would be without those items. Any questions about the similarity layer? Okay, our next layer here is that ETS Eraider layer. Remember when we created our assignment, it's just a simple yes or no. If you choose no when creating your assignment, this layer will just disappear for both you and your student. You won't see it. But if you choose to use it, it will create these purple comments for your students automatically. When they click on one of these, it will give them a description. You, as the instructor, have the ability to add a comment. Students do not. But you or the student can click this View Handbook link here, and it will take them to our online handbook. By default, we chose an advanced level handbook, but they can toggle between these handbooks if they want to, and they can also move around through the table of contents to see different areas of that online handbook. And again, I got to that just by clicking on one of these purple comments and clicking on View Handbook. Now, keep in mind these purple comments, the ETS Eraider, like I mentioned, it is artificial intelligence, which means that it is not going to be 100% correct all the time. You may on occasion find that you don't agree with one of these marks. And if you don't agree with it, you can open it up and you can click Dismiss. Oh, shoot. It just logged me out. I apologize. Let me see if I can open it back up again. Sorry about that. Let me go back here. So like I was mentioning before, you can dismiss any of these comments if you want, and they'll drop off for both you and your student. You can dismiss comments, your students cannot. If we go to our ETS Eraider layer, lets us know that we have one mark dismissed. If I want to bring it back, I can click Reveal All, and it will send that mark back onto our student's paper. Here are all the areas that we chose when creating the assignment that we wanted it to check for. If I wanted to, for instance, I could say I want to turn off mechanics, and you can see all those purple comments just dropped off. And they would drop off for me and for my students. If I turn it back on, those comments will come back. So we have a number of different ways that we found that instructors are using the ETS Eraider. Some of them are using it, they love it, and they leave it as is, and they create an assignment, and it gives more help to their students. We have some instructors who say they have their students submit their paper, and they tell their students, you need to go in and fix all the purple comments first, then I want you to resubmit, and that's when I will start grading your paper. And then we have some instructors who say, I just don't use it at all, and they just choose to turn it off when creating their assignment. And like I mentioned, it disappears for both the instructor and the student. Any questions about the Eraider layer or comments? Okay. The next button here are our information tools. So the first button here is the submission information. This is just a nice quick view of our student submission information. Next, we have our download button. You and your students have access to all of this material as well. They can, or you can, download the originally submitted file. So if you want to see the Word file outside of Feedback Studio, you can download that file. The digital receipt is that submission information in printable form. And then we also have a current view report. What the current view report is a comprehensive PDF document that covers everything that we just walked through. So if I click on that, you can see here that it's preparing a download for me. Now this paper is about, I don't know, 1.5 pages at most, but you can see it's created this PDF document, and what it's actually created is a 9-page document. So when I scroll through this, you can see I have my student's title, my student's name, submission information. Here are all of our comments, all of our highlights, all of our matches. Here's my student's score, where those where those matches came from, and then the list of those largest matches, as well as any exclusions we may have chosen. Here's a list of our comments. If I had added any comments, our student grade, and a page-by-page list of every Quickmark, comment, Strikethrough, ETS Eraider mark, everything that we've added to those students' papers. And then lastly is the rubric itself and how our students scored in that rubric. So this is a wonderful document. Students can print up on their side just as easy as you can. They can bring it to office hours. They can bring it to a writing lab. But it's a great document that's available to both you and your students at 24/7. And again, I got to that by clicking on the download button and clicking the current view report. The other things I'll show you in here, obviously you saw we have our page count and our word count here. We also have a text-only report. And if I choose that, it's just a different view of what we were seeing before. It's HTML driven, so it helps with accessibility, but it's also just going to show you text. So if maybe this was a 100-page research paper and it included a lot of diagrams and charts and pictures and that type of thing, it would take all of that out and just show you text. So some instructors really like it. It's easier for them to read through a student's paper without all those images and having to scroll. It's up to you. You do still have those largest matches. You can still choose your exclusions. You also have some different modes and views available to you, such as show matches one at a time. If you choose that and click change mode, it will actually break out each match for you one at a time so that you can see that match and all the different areas or places it matched to. And then you also have highest matches and the quick view classic report as well. So this is just another view of what we were just taking a look at, but this is an option as well. I can click on document viewer. It'll take me back into the regular feedback studio. And I got to that report by clicking on the text only report here. Any questions about anything that we just walked through inside Feedback Studio? Okay. I'm going to close out a couple of things here. Oh, it looks like it did actually log me out of my Moodle course. So 1 second here. Oh, let's go ahead and log out and I'll log back in again. Okay. Now you also have the ability to use Turnitin inside forms. So in this case here, I created a Turnitin form. I added my own discussion. Here's my discussion. If I open that up, I simply ask students, what are some common forms of plagiarism? Here's my student submission. And when they submit, you can see it also generates a Turnitin paper ID and a score for them. So you can also use this for discussions. If students are typing right in or if they copy and paste, when they submit their papers to a Turnitin form, it gives them a score as well and you a score. And if you click on it, it will open up Feedback Studio so that you can take a look at all those similarities just like we saw before. To do that or to create a Turnitin form discussion, oops, let me go back here. Just like before, I'm going to turn on our editing first and we're going to click to add an activity. And at this time, we're going to choose to create a form. We need to give it a name. We can give it a description, form type. The important part after you go through all of your other options here is this Turnitin plagiarism plugin settings. This is where you actually turn this into a Turnitin forum. So you'll click on that. You'll choose whether or not to enable Turnitin. If you choose yes, these are now available options. Do you want to display originality reports to students? Yes or no. If you choose no, it will still generate those reports for you. Students just won't be able to see them. Again, allow submission of any file type. Check against stored student papers, internet, journals, publications. Same options we went through before. Report generation speed. Same options as when creating the assignment. Same exclusions. Basically the same options. You'll notice you just don't have the ability to add a rubric to a discussion. So just something to keep in mind there. But you can still use the ETS Eraider if you'd like. You just need to turn it on. And then you can use that as well. And now when students submit to that discussion forum, it will run that student's paper through our repositories just like it did for the papers. All I have to do is come down and click Save and Display. And now my student can submit to that discussion. Any questions about using Turnitin in the discussion forum before I jump over to the student side of things? Okay, so let me go ahead and log out here. As a student, I will enter in my course. Here are those assignments I just created. All I have to do is jump into my assignment. And you can see here's the assignment that I just created. I have our paper assignment and our final draft. You can see I have my Peermark assignment here, but my start date has not passed, so I don't have an icon to open it up. So I can't complete that peer review assignment until I've submitted and the due date has passed. Once it has submitted, I will have a green icon over here that I can open. And I'm going to show you another paper where we can take a look at that. But for a regular assignment, all I have to do as a student is click on Submit Paper, choose File Upload or Text Submission, Submission Title, Then I just need to choose my file. I can choose from uploading a file from my hard drive, Dropbox, the other options here available to you and your students. I just need to choose my file, choose my paper, choose how I want this saved as, has my name as my author, and all I have to do is click upload this file. And then I have to click add submission. You can see it's successfully been uploaded. It gives me my submission ID here. And all I have to do is actually close this out. And now you can see it's accepted it, but my similarity score is pending. Typically, this can take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes. We do say it can take up to 10 minutes, just depending on how large the file is that's being submitted and how busy the Turnitin servers are at that time. Typically, it goes through in about 30 seconds. So let's see if I refresh. There you go. You see it's already been run through. So now as a student, I can click on this paper and open up Feedback Studio. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump to this other assignment that I submitted to ahead of time. And I'll open this one up instead. So this is the one we actually went in and marked up. So now when the student opens up their student's paper, here you can see all of our comments and our Quickmarks, our highlights, all available to our student, as well as the ETS Eraider marks. They can click on any of these to see my comment. And they can see that it has been, rubric criterion has been added as well. They can see all my marks. The Similarity Report works exactly the same, except for those options or items that I mentioned before. They don't have the ability to add their own Quickmarks. They don't have the ability to exclude sources, and they don't have the ability to add comments to an ETS Eraider mark, but they can still obviously view the handbook, and they can download that current view report if they want to, and they have all the other options that we looked at as well. Okay. Now that was a student submission. You can see here's a Peermark assignment that I have for this assignment here. Once the due date has passed for our paper and the start date has begun, we have this little button here, which is to launch our peer review assignments. You can see here I can view the details if I want to. And then you can also see I have the ability to review. So if I click on the review button here, see for my student, this student came in and they added these comments here. Here is their answers to this peer review assignment. You know what, I apologize. Let me close this out. I'm gonna go to, I think it was topic 4. Yes, this is the one. So 1 second here. This one, I believe, or is this the one I just created? I'm sorry, 1 second. Here we go. So this is one I had created earlier that is actually live. So when I open it up, you can see I can start my peer review, or in this case, this is my self-review. So for this assignment, I asked the student to review another student's paper, and I also asked them to review themselves. In this assignment, I don't have any other students who have submitted yet, so I can't review another paper until another student is submitted, and then I can start the peer review assignment. But I can start my own self-review, and it looks and acts exactly the same way as a peer review. So all that student has to do is click on the review button. It opens up, in this case, this student's own paper or another student's paper. Here are the questions that I added as an instructor that I want my students to answer. And all they have to do is come in and answer those questions. As I go through and answer these questions, you can see my progress bar begins to move towards completed. I can save this at any time and come back to it. I can submit it whenever I'd like. I also have the ability to print, and I even have some tools for annotation. So I can click on this little commenting button, and it creates a little box for me. As a student, I can type in something for them. I can highlight if I want to, and I can add a comment. I can add marks for them. In this case, spelling or awkward. And now the other student can view these marks in their paper. then once I've gone through and I've completed my review, I can click the submit button. It will let me know that I have some unanswered questions. In case I haven't gone all the way through and completed it, it will remind the student, but I'm going to click submit anyway. It lets me know my submission is complete, and I can move back to the review and back to the inbox. So that's how easy it is for students to access their peer review, Peermark assignments, and to review a student's paper. The last item I'll show you here, here is our discussion. I apologize, that jumped me out to, oh, you know what I think it was, is that I didn't add a discussion topic. I apologize. But without having to go back and add back to my instructor side and create that discussion thread, basically your students, like normal, would go into a discussion just like they did here. Oops, no, I don't know why I did that again. I apologize. Try the forum here. Okay, so like I showed you earlier, you would start a discussion thread and they would submit to it, and it will give them that score that they can then click on, and you as the instructor can click on as well. That is pretty much everything I needed to cover for the student side. Any questions about the student side of thing at all? Okay, so that pretty much brings us to the end of our training today. Any questions about anything at all having to do with Turnitin? Okay, well, thank you everybody for your time today. I really appreciate it. Shinshin, I will send you the recording so that you can send that out if you'd like.
Hey, Ryan, it's actually Jill. I actually have some questions if everybody has time.
Sure.
Okay, great. I wanted to check in for the, I really like that Turnitin updated the fact that you can have two different parts to the assignment, of assignment part 1 and part 2. So you don't have to always create separate assignments if you want to draft. But do you have to grade both of them? Is there an option not to grade part 1, for example, if that's going to be the draft? That's one question.
So you can create multiple parts and you can make that part worth 0 if you want to.
Okay, cool. How long does it take to refresh the scores on Originality Reports? When they resubmit, sorry.
Oh, so it should be very quick, depending on, again, how large that file is and how busy the servers are. It may take a little longer, but as long as it's the first submission or 3 resubmissions, it'll come back immediately. It's that 4th resubmission where it could take up to 24 hours.
Okay, cool. Another question is this an LTI integration with Moodle?
No, this is a plugin.
This is a plugin. Okay, so when you, are you having, I'm guessing that Moodle has its own service for grading. In other words, in Canvas, it's Speed Grader.
Right.
I'm guessing Moodle has their own. So I'm curious about how the integration has worked in the past between the gradebook and I think it's called Quickmarks. Is that correct?
So this is where, unfortunately, I lack, because although I know how Turnitin interacts with Moodle, I don't know anything about Moodle's own grading interface.
Okay, but the experience of faculty between the integration between Turnitin, Grademark, the grading, and their gradebook in Moodle has been satisfactory?
Oh, yes. You mean as far as grades transferring and just accessibility by students, that type of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been great.
Okay, fabulous, fabulous. What else did I have? What's the difference between a grading form and the rubric?
So the grading form is kind of a toned down rubric. Basically, you would create, you know what, maybe, let me see if would you like me to jump back over to the instructor side?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay, so 1 second here. Let's just go back and edit this. Oops, it's the next one. Sorry about that. So obviously a rubric looks like this. A grading form, you basically just create your own criterion and a description, and then you just assign point values for each of these areas.
Okay, so it's basically a super broad rubric then.
Exactly. I
Okay.
always call it kind of a toned down rubric, but yeah.
Okay, and let me see this last one here. Give me a second here. When you're faculty, from the faculty experience, and you need to view originality reports for a student, but you also need to give feedback, what is the best workflow? In other words, because there's several different access points. Do you go to the gradebook? Do you go to the assignment and then go to the inbox like you showed us? Like, what is the kind of the best practice for that workflow for the faculty?
Practice, I think, is to open up the assignment and then just click on the score.
Okay, cool. And can you remind me, if students have more than one submission, let's say assignment part 1, let's say they submit 2 or 3 drafts before the due date for part 1, I cannot view their previous submissions. I can only view their latest submission. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Ryan, I want to say thank you. That new tool for the discussion is awesome. It's great
good.
that you guys developed that. I think it's been in the past year. And your presentation has been super helpful. Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. I'm so glad you could join.
Cool. Have a good day.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
Thank you, Ryan. I just want to let you know we have another Turnitin workshop on Tuesday, November 12th, from 11 to 12. I put the information on the chat window. The Alden from the GHS is going to talk about how to use Turnitin, share some tips, and how he used Turnitin in their department.